In D.C., it's rainy in the nation's capital on this Sunday. It's approaching 7 p.m. in D.C. We hear it live now, of course. We've been tracking everything in the Middle East. President Trump putting the brakes on what was likely to be some sort of large-scale military operation in the Middle East. We're waiting for more word from President Trump after he ordered American forces to hold off on new strikes against Iran last night. Trump says regional allies reached the parameters of a deal to end the 5-month-old war. We've also been checking in on updates from some of the outlets that we track. That, of course, includes Phil Stewart over at Reuters, who says Iran's foreign minister says negotiations between Iran and Oman over Hormuz are in the final stages. Let's bring Phil in. He's here with us. Help our audience understand the difference between a fully open Strait of Hormuz versus what Iran and Oman might be talking about.
That's a great question. We're all trying to figure out what it is that Iran and Oman are actually negotiating. The agreement that was signed between the United States and Iran, the MOU, it was very vague about the status of the Strait of Hormuz to the point where Iran and the United States simply didn't agree on what was negotiated. So right now, here we are again. You have the president talking about negotiations, which he just said about an hour ago, are going to resume tomorrow, Monday, and we don't know who's going to be part of those negotiations, but they're going to be about the Strait of Hormuz. They're going to be about opening the Strait of Hormuz, and what that means for the U.S. and what that means for Iran this time, hopefully will be, the same thing. Hopefully both sides can agree on what that means.
How important is Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in all of this?
Well, fascinating you ask, because there was a call just recently between Iran and the Saudis, and there is discussion going on between them and the Pakistanis, and the Saudis have also called over to the United States and had conversations here. So, the Saudis are quite active. Don't forget, the Saudis also struck on Wednesday with the United States against Iran-backed militia inside Iraq. So they joined in some of the actual fighting in the region, which is a new step for them, although they said they were not seeking escalation. That was seen by many analysts and experts as an act of escalation by a country that has sought to show itself as a moderate actor. So the Saudis are playing a pivotal role. They're in conversations with the Iranians. They're in conversations with the U.S. They're getting more active militarily, and we could see more of that if the Houthis, who are in neighboring Yemen, press their campaign against the Saudis, which was running in parallel to what the Iranians were doing throughout the region.
Bab el-Mandeb Strait is something we'll be watching as far as the Houthis and the Saudis go. Any other Gulf states on your radar? What's the likelihood that, and the Saudis, they took an offensive position with the strikes in Iraq. Is there a possibility that other Gulf states might do the same eventually?
We don't know. We don't know what the other Gulf states might already be doing, as part of some of this planning. A lot of what, Reuters and other outlets have reported is that some Gulf states had taken, quiet part in some of the activities earlier this year. And we don't know which direction this campaign is headed. Right now, the president says that they're talking, that they need to reach an agreement, but we've heard that before, and both sides have maintained these sort of maximalist positions that have not reached a firm understanding of where they need to go. And so we could see a resumption of even major combat operations, which is something that, was sort of implicitly threatened in the latest escalation they were talking about that was called off. So, if there is a resumption of major combat operations, you might see other Gulf states taking part quietly or even publicly. But, it's a new ballgame if that were to happen.
Do we have any level of understanding of what exactly was called off last night?
We know that it was going to be a big escalation. Some sources had suggested it could be a return to major combat operations, but we don't have that 100%. The president was prepared to move forward. There were forces that we understand were ready to go, and I think they are still ready to go if that order were to come down. So a lot's at stake right now with these negotiations, and we'll have to just see. We've been here before.
I want to ask you a question I asked Alon a little bit earlier in the hour. Does it feel like Netanyahu's influence on the White House is diminishing?
It's hard for me to really say that. The U.S. and Israel are such close partners. But then again, you've seen this sort of public acrimony between the president and the prime minister, which is, very rare, for that relationship. So, there's obviously been a change in how President Trump speaks about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but whether or not that actually results in a material difference in the U.S. relationship with Israel, is a big question. What we understand is that these two military partners are still pretty firmly aligned, and they were ready to act together if needed.
We, really the whole globe kind of understood and learned what a memorandum of understanding is with the most recent deal between the Iranians and the Americans. But what is and the verbiage that President Trump is using here is the parameters of a deal. How would you define what that means?
In some ways, it's even more vague than a memorandum of understanding. Parameters of a deal could be, another MOU. It could be, and just, using a different name because the last time they tried to say MOU, it didn't work out. It's sort of like when you have like a ceasefire, but then, the ceasefire is broken and then they agree to pause hostilities. You don't want to say ceasefire again because, that terminology has been used. So it could be that we're looking for a new MOU without saying MOU, or it could be that we're looking at something closer to a final agreement. I kind of find that hard to believe, given, the rhetoric out of both capitals right now.
You can find Phil's writing at Reuters. Appreciate the time. Thanks.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, let's hit our first break of the hour. A live look at the White House. President Trump back in D.C. after being in Bedminster earlier today. We'll be back in about 2 minutes.